Hi.
Hello.
Sorry.
It's the chuckle.
Hello. Good to
I
see
love
you.
it.
Uh,
I love it.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Sofa Series Artist Spotlight. Today with me is Nicolee Kuester, who is holing up in Boulder, Colorado.
It's true. Howdy,
Hello,
howdy.
my friend.
My Colorado flannel and my only you can prevent forest fires. It's not intentional, but
You're
really repping the mountains.
repping hard for the outdoorsy folk.
Yes.
Well, my friend, so tell the people who maybe don't know you so well, tell us who you are. Where are you? I guess, well, we know you're from Boulder,
Mhm.
you're from Colorado, and I guess where have you been? Where did you go to school? What did you study? What has your path been thus far?
So I have a few hats that I wear, and I'm actually really excited that
You're
Sofa
not wearing a
Series.
hat.
I know they're invisible. They're all invisible hats.
Okay.
But the thing that I actually really appreciated about Sofa Series was that I get to wear the writer hat, which is a little bit less common for me. The way that I normally make rent and food payments is by playing the French horn. So I'm a musician. I do text related stuff. I also do some performance art things when people can gather. And let's see. So I'm from Boulder, Colorado. And I'm back. Normally, also during the regular times, which hopefully will return at some point. I live in Brooklyn, so I'm New York City based right now, and freelance there. I play horn for kind of whoever wants me to. I specialize more in experimental music on that front, but again, I'm pretty happy doing sort of whatever music involves the horn and finding good people who want to make interesting things and value the things that I want to make. That's sort of the dream at the moment.
That's a good dream.
Yeah. Let's
Reality
see.
though,
Credential.
that's the dream.
Yeah. No, it is. It's sometimes those two things mesh, and that's really
That's
like
nice.
that's when you know you've hit pay dirt. Is when you yeah. It's like really finding yourself, like waking up and finding yourself amidst people who like value what you do and people that you think are cool too. And yeah, anyway, so that's just sort of kind of pursuing things like that in New York. Was this the state of things pre-March? And in terms of credentials, I went to undergrad at Oberlin College and Conservatory, and I studied creative writing and French horn there. And kudos to my parents for agreeing that that was a good 5 year idea. Um, and then I decided that I wanted to really like study hard on the strange music spectrum of things. So I went out to UC San Diego, where you and I met back 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Amazing. So I did my master's there in contemporary music performance, and 4 years of doctoral work that I then left right before finishing my dissertation to go to New
Yeah,
York.
to be clear, writing a dissertation, it is like the most grueling, soul searching, soul crushing. It's ecstatic and you can be sublime, but really it's just a lot of
Yeah,
sadness.
I'm excited about it. I'm really excited about having time to write this document. And
Well, so now you've
but
said it
yeah,
out in the into the
I know
ether. People have
it's
heard you
public.
say this. It is
It's gonna
on
happen.
record. Get it done, Nicolee.
That's the plan. That is the plan.
So how does a gangly gal from Boulder, Colorado, decide on the French horn? What is it about the French
Uh,
horn?
Well, there's a lot of things, but I mean, the story that I tell. So I grew up listening to classical music. My dad is an electrical engineering professor, but he also has a very large record collection of like 20th century orchestral music.
Right.
So I grew up listening to like Shostakovich and Mahler and Steve Reich, and so I just like heard these big. Yeah, it's funny. His taste in music goes right up to 1970, and then like nothing beyond that. And like all the weird stuff from 1972. Like I listened to like Pure Boulez, and he had like Morton Sabatnik LPs, and
like
I mean he still has these things. Yeah, Ligeti, all that stuff.
All
yeah.
that stuff.
So I heard horn as a kid, and I'm in the middle of 3 kids, and we were in a school system where the band program started in the 5th grade. And so I'd seen my brother already start that journey, and he had picked the trombone. And so I knew that like nighttime was coming and I could like pick my instrument. And so I knew I didn't want it to be a normal instrument. I wanted to play a weird instrument. So like the violin and the clarinet and the flute was out. So I narrowed it down to either the cello, the oboe, or the French horn. And my mother nixed the cello. She said, "No, you can't play cello."
Okay.
Because beginning cellists sound bad, which is as opposed to beginning oboists and beginning horn players. So
oh, bless.
She dug that grave herself. With the oboe, I would have had to start on the clarinet, and I didn't want to play the clarinet, so it was down to the horn. And so they said, "Okay, you can play the horn, but it's really hard, so you have to get lessons right away." And I was like, "Cool, awesome!" And started out and happened to be pretty okay at it from the beginning. And so yeah, I just made this decision when I was 10 that has ended up being the thing that I am now professional at.
What foresight!
Who knew?
Maturity, my God.
Or something. Or it's just like you couldn't, it was like too late and I couldn't go back and make any other choices. That does happen though.
Oh, totally. So, yeah. Right. I joined choir because my sister did it, and I just wanted to do everything that my sister did, and then I did it, and then I was like, oh, okay, I'm okay at this.
Right.
I get this. This makes sense to me.
And it was like
doing this.
The instrument was a voice that I really liked, and it's really versatile. Like you've got this sort of like film music heroism, and like you can do the nostalgia, and it's sort of romantic, but it's like the most introverted of the brass instruments because it points backwards, and it's more mellow, and you get lots of colors and different characters that you can
I have this like cartoon in my head now, just like the introverted French horn, just like, hey guys, you know.
But it is.
Any questions?
It's a real team player. It's like not a good solo instrument, but it's a really great instrument for blending with other instruments. Yeah. So that's the thing that I really miss right now is not being able to play with other people.
Yeah. I mean, you could play your horn calls. Some of your Wagnerian orchestra.
Oh yeah.
Excerpts across the field outside your house.
That's what the people want right now. I think that's definitely what the people want.
Yeah.
Go up into the mountains.
Horns.
Yeah.
That is my French.
Yes.
So I wonder if how did you? So we all have these different artistic exploits that at times can feel very disparate, but of course they're all nurtured and explored simultaneously. So as a writer, I suppose as a kid you were just sort of always jotting down some stories. Were you kind of creating like theatrical stories in your bedroom, that kind of a thing, or was it always on the page?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think I started out reading a ton. I read a lot as a kid, and I didn't write my own stuff all that much until I was a little bit older. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was, if you want to talk about like 5th grade career choices, if you asked me in 4th grade what I wanted to be before I started playing music, I was like, well, I really like reading, but I don't really think I like writing that much, so I want to be an editor. So my 9-year-old self was like, what job can I have where I can just read a whole bunch and not have to actually write anything? Which is really hilarious in retrospect.
Great. Great.
But yeah, I think I always had a pretty vivid imagination and did the thing I think that a lot of girls do with like the imagination games, that like everybody is in a house and we're all animals and somebody's the mom and we're gonna dig like new rooms for all the babies or whatever, it's just there was imagine, I don't know, somehow I was always the mom and I was always responsible for making new rooms for people. But yeah, so I think there's lots of like narrative stories that were going on. But I didn't really develop a serious writing practice, I think, until I went to college, and switched from an English major to the creative writing major. And found like, oh, actually generating my own work was super satisfying. And because the thing, especially as a classical musician, is so much of your performing life is about interpreting other people's work. Especially because right now it's so much more common for performers to be kind of in one lane and composers to be in another lane, whereas back in Beethoven's day, composers were performers and vice versa more often. So I love interpreting other people's work, and I think that that's really interesting, but there's also something that's so satisfying about just making your own stuff. And presenting that and just having it be like a reflection of whatever it is that's going on inside your brain.
How would you...
I don't know if that answered your question at all.
No, it's a great answer. You're wonderful. So how would you describe your style of writing? I guess we can talk specifically about the poetry, because it's not necessarily narrative, it's not necessarily representational or like telling any sort of anything clear to if I may tell you what your poetry is.
Yes, please do. Please do tell me.
It sounds a lot like you like the sounds of certain word constructs, that it's not necessarily lyrical in any way, but
yeah,
describe.
There's always been a really fascinating connection for me with the way that people speak in music, with like the sound of human speaking voices and melody. It's like that same, like you get as much emotional information from the cadence of someone's speech and how they say whatever it is that they said. You slept with my wife, you slept with my wife, just like there's like so much information just like carried in the lilt of human voice. And so I like the sound and I like the music of language, but that music it always sort of feeds back into emotion. And it's always, language does this fun thing where if you put together English words or words in any language, even if syntactically they don't go together, like, I don't know, give me a noun.
Bird.
Okay, I love birds. And if we take something that's not necessarily related to a bird, like, I don't know, telephone, and then we take an action that's not maybe necessarily related to either of those, which is, I don't know, running, like those three things together, even if I just say bird, telephone, running, like that conjures something, like your brain tries to do something with that, even though there's like lots of little conflicts that happen, but it's like there's all these potential meanings that just sort of emerge from that. And I do like to kind of play with images that don't quite make sense, but don't like shut you out entirely. Like they invite some sort of meaning, but it's not something that it's ephemeral, like you can't hold on to it necessarily. Anyway, so I don't know, I would say for me, the poems are like, they rest in an emotional space and in a space that welcomes meaning, that welcomes like a variety of meanings that maybe don't all go together.
And that there is no rightness, right? Like
there's no rightness, but also it's not totally random, you know, like it's not, I like to think that they're welcoming spaces and that you can just show up and have the experience that you experience with whatever the text is, and that's good, and that like it's a personal experience, and it's not about like being smart enough to understand what's going on, because there are some poems that I read that I'm like, wow, I should be smarter.
I don't get this.
Like, I don't get it. And so I'm hoping that it's not an I don't get it situation, but it's just sort of like, wow, this is mysterious, and I want to like spend some time with it, and it's not freaky. Hopefully.
It's not freaky. It's just nice, you know? It's
great. I love it. That's the goal. Yeah, I think weird but kind. Yeah. I said this to someone, is like that my ultimate aesthetic is like weird but kind.
Yeah.
But like that's how I want it to be, or strange but kind.
Just always kind. I guess, and you also like to play around with word order too, right? Like there's like a long there's a series of poems that we explored in our time together, where it was just like pages and pages of maybe about 6 or 7 or so words, just reordered, and each line felt wildly different than
right.
the rest, you know.
Right, or like sentences set up expectations based on how you structure them. Mm-hmm. And so it's like if I say, oh, it was raining buckets of, then it just sort of, it leads you up to this cliff, and you're like, you want it to say it. You want to fill something in, and but there's not, you know, I like also that speech can also imply lots of things that are never said or can't be said. Mm-hmm. And I, especially in this set of poems, I like to leave lots of space for things that can't be spoken or written down. Yeah. And language can sort of point to that, but not say it. Yeah, word order is so fun. Like tweak things and then people get like, what?
Wait a minute. What? Well, that's, I mean, not to like knock you off your high horse, but you didn't come up with that, you know, like, so there's like a whole movement of poets that predate you that sort of explore this thing, and it's, you know, like what is it, the junk is no good, baby. That's one of
yes. Junk is no good, baby. No good baby is junk.
No good, baby. So in your performance practice as a performance artist, so performance art, I think, can mean many things. So for you, how are you taking this like umbrella art form and situating yourself within it?
Oh man, always a great question. I think, right, because performance art can mean all kinds of different things, and I think it has some associations with people when you bring it up of like a lot of the real shock value type of work that was being done, especially in the 70s and 80s, that usually involved people injuring themselves, and
lots of nudity,
lots of blood.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a small side note, but I teach normally at a summer school for high school kids in North Carolina. That's like a 6-week program for like smarty pants kids in the state. And I teach, ostensibly I'm the brass instructor there, but I also show up and just do performance art. Like I've sort of redone Marina Abramovich pieces there. And I can tell you that there's like no better audience for performance art than smart 17-year-olds, because you can still like really surprise them, and like doing things that are outside of social norms is like really shocking to them. But they also are willing to like sit down and be like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, they also have a really good like the bullshit detectors.
Yes. Yeah, like you have to really do the thing, and then they will be impressed if you spend 3 hours cutting oranges in slow motion in the hot North Carolina sun. Like they'll find that
legally sentenced. Ever.
Yeah. But one thing, so in speaking of nudity and blood, it's like that was
And 17-year-olds?
the segue, right? So the segue there is like I would do this thing, and then I would give a seminar about like here's various performance artists, here's some of the work that I've done. If you want to do performance art on this campus, and like as part of this school, like the 3 rules are no blood, stay conscious, and keep your pants on. So I'd have them like repeat because I don't want them like, so it's like you can't, all the 70s and 80s stuff is like,
Yeah, we gotta have some ground rules.
like,
Children.
listen, when you're 18 and out of your house, you can do whatever you want
You
as
can
long as
do
it's
whatever you want with your
public
pants.
indecency. But
Yeah.
anyway, my own my own practice, I'm really interested in durational performance. I'm really interested in experiencing what happens if you try to do something for a long time. Often, so like I designed this piece at this school, and it was called Halftime, and I had 6 oranges that I cut in very, very, very slow motion for 3 hours, and then I would like put a segment once it was sliced. I would like put it onto a plate, and then the kids could eat it, and they'd watch. Like that was the really shocking thing, is that they actually showed up and they were like really excited about like what was going on, and they showed up with like an umbrella and started like shading me because they got really worried that I would get sunburned, and I was like not speaking to them. It's like total like fourth wall was fully intact here.
Yeah.
But just like really interesting to see in that way like what ways in which like audiences develop around you, and what sort of like rules that they decide for themselves are like what's how yeah, I like watching myself navigate those situations. I like watching other people navigate those situations.
I think that to me is like the real pulse of
right
performance art, like, bodies being destroyed
yes
inside. It's that the relationship between the spectator and the object, right? And for those who are not like critical theory nerds, the object of the gaze, the thing that is being viewed, the action that is being viewed, and then it gives a lot of agency to the viewer to decide whether or not they want to become a participant. And I think that even if they don't know it, they are making that decision. Do I interact? Can I touch it? Can I?
Yeah, it's this sort of beautiful. It's the thing that I love. Like at its best, performance art is this art that sort of like strips away technique. It strips away media, and you're left with like a body and another body, and like maybe one of those bodies is like the performer or whatever. But it's like it's bodies sharing space, and in ways that are not socially dictated. Right. So like we can be in a room at the same time, and if I'm not behaving in like quite a normal way, then like something different happens, and it's this sort of like beautiful immediacy, and you get to sort of like, I don't know, you get to break through to like other people's experiences. I think it brings down a lot of layers of separation that can happen between people at its best, and you try things sometimes and they don't work. But yeah, I think that's really what it is. It's like about just like the very essence of like being a live person with another live person. And like and you're doing like maybe these sort of strange things, but it's really just to like kind of figure out like how it is to be a person with another person, or with like lots of other people, and like how that works out in space. I think that's what I love about it. It just makes that available, and it can't be recorded, and it can't be sold. It's like really, really unmarketable.
It's experiential. It sort of happens and it goes away.
Right, like you have to be there.
You have to be there.
But absolutely have to be
Missed
there.
it. Well, talk a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about your work with Leah Asscher? You did this piece. Where in Scandinavia was it? Was she in Norway?
She was in Norway. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you did this home piece that was extra
Yes.
durational. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So Leah Asscher is a very old friend of mine. She's the same age as me, but she's a very old friend. Um, and she
Very
is,
fun.
we've known each other since 2004, since we were
Whoa.
wee babes. But she's a violinist and composer and painter and performer. Um, and she had a job for 3 years working at a sinfonietta in northern Norway, way like above the Arctic Circle. They still
Way
have
up there.
culture above the Arctic Circle in Norway. Um, and
Correct.
she brought five of us together to so here's a wonderful thing about Norway is that they've got so much oil money that their government supports performance art, and so we applied for this grant to do a durational performance piece at the Arts Festival of Northern Norway in Harstad, Norway, which is an island. And this was in June, so then the sun never went down. But so the piece was called House Art House, I believe, was that what it was called. And it was, we had a building that had sort of two separate rooms. One of the rooms, and this was an 8-hour sort of performance installation, I think is what we called it. And at the beginning, one of the rooms was totally barren, and the other room was sort of this bizarre kind of like cave-like home
Hmm.
setup. So there were lots of cushions everywhere. There's a projector with like some film. There's lots of like things that you find in a home, knitting and games and photos and just like home-like objects. And we very gradually, over the course of 8 hours, dismantled this space and sort of put things in like, and moved them into this other room in a very specific kind of order. So everything was just ended up being laid out on the ground, but in a way that you don't live in it. It's like, oh, we've dismantled this scarf and laid all the pieces of yarn like in parallel order, and we ended up with this sort of very interesting assemblage of home objects in this other room, but that were set out in this very, they're sort of on display in this very abstract way. Meanwhile,
You
so
were
yeah, meanwhile, soup was cooking. So the start of the piece, as this dismantling is happening, I'm like making soup in a crock pot that is also then cooking for the 8 hours. And we had a dinner at the very end of the piece in this new space with the soup.
with the organized objects.
Yeah, and sort of periodically over the course of 8 hours, these kind of miniature performances would emerge in the space too, and there would be sort of small musical moments and improvisations and like movement dance pieces and that kind of thing as things were sort of being moved from one space to another.
Were guests encouraged to stay the whole time, or were people allowed to come and go?
Yeah, people, I think, yeah, you could come and go. I think that was the idea. I think I would have been very happy for folks to stay for 8 hours, but it's also nice to kind of show up and see what's happening and then go see something else at the festival and then come back 2 hours later and sort of check in and
Hmm.
have some toast. There's also a toaster. People
Weird
just
but
make their own
kind.
toast. Yes, exactly. Like, wouldn't you want to have toast? Like, just, it's like a great, like, well, who doesn't want toast?
Oh, I love toast.
Yeah.
I do.
It's like, show up, have some toast, and then, yeah. So it was a very sort of multi-sensory, long piece. Yeah, just was sort of like a careful dismantling of a home.
What did you feel like you got from all that?
That was a really interesting um, collaborative process. So Leah and I both worked on this, but there are also 3 other colleagues from Norway and the US / the Netherlands. So we were all kind of converging. So a lot of this, we weren't all in the same place. And so we had to do all of this remotely, all of the planning for this project remotely, and then show up a week before, and then really like long days of just setup and planning. And
Yeah.
finding thrift stores in northern Norway. So that was really, I really loved that could come together. And I hadn't met two of the people who were on that project until I showed up in Norway. So that was, yeah, it was lovely to sort of like make a strange home with these people very quickly, and then take it apart and look at it and interact in that way. So it's like these relationships are also being performed as well as the space in which they're happening, as well as this sort of home space. So I'm always all about that.
So like, what was your takeaway then after?
Oh man. Well, my takeaway is that Norway can support stranger art by newer artists. That like a piece like that could definitely happen in the States, but it would need to be someone who had like a very long established career in order to get that kind of support. So like I've never done a project like that again, stateside, of that largeness. I've definitely, Leah and I still have an ongoing project called Meaningless Work, where we present 2 or 3 concerts a year that are sort of combination performance art, music, movement theater, text, sort of whatever we're interested in at the time. So, and that's like sort of these miniature versions of some of the things that we were interested in with House Art House. Yeah, I don't know. I think the takeaway is really just like that these collaborations can happen, and it's really heartening. I think that people who, people really can come together and make something special. Yeah.
But also it's like, there's no staying in your lane
Right. Yeah.
which I think is pretty great. I think that even in like the classical music world, that people never really stick to one. A career path nowadays is very forked, and it goes in any number of directions, and you have to wear many hats that are not visible. And so how does horn playing and kind of mix in with your text work, your performance artwork, your exploration of space and time, and all of that?
That is such a good question, and that's a question that I am still asking myself. There's a lot of times I think my horn playing is compartmentalized from my other performing lives. Partly because the instrument is a more odd. It's an odder instrument. So, it's like if you see a horn, it's just this sort of like virtuosic set of plumbing. It's like I feel like it's a very interesting object, and it's not like you see a violin and you're like, oh yeah, it's a violin, and I'm like, oh, it's a harmonica or whatever. But it's like, well, and so if I want to combine poetry with horn playing, for instance, it's the visuals of it, like the sound, whatever, like those two things can go together really well. But the visuals of like saying something and then being like, and now I'm gonna pull out that what is that? It's just like it's like it's the aesthetic.
Nicolee, if you do it like that, it's stupid.
What have I got under this chair here?
My ear.
That's what I've been doing wrong this whole time, guys.
You're just doing like dad parlor tricks.
Yeah, right. Like, kid, come here. You've got some. Oh my God, it's huge.
Oh, whoa!
And you could play Strauss on it. So yeah, it's an interesting. And I play string. Like I improvise. I do experimental things with horn. But the text and music in particular are really. And I mean, you're a singer, so you know this more than so many people, but like text and music have a kind of fraught relationship, in that as soon as you put words with music, the music automatically becomes accompanimental. I don't think that they can live at like equal levels. and singing might be the way in which those things happen, is that you can have music and words combined, but like if I'm saying some words and then there's like a horn track that's happening at the same time, or I'm playing horn and someone else is speaking, then it automatically becomes this sort of strange beatnik situation, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm saying a poem and then there's some like cool something's happening underneath, you know. So it's an interesting, that's always the sort of like dilemma that I come to with combining music and text. And so often the poem is just like, it's just someone talking and there's not like any sort of musical, like instrumental things that are happening underneath it, because immediately everybody puts on a beret and
Yeah, it becomes the thing.
it becomes like the 1950s.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, could potentially be a beautiful thing, but it's hard to sort of like remove that from a really stereotypical kind of beatniky vibe.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you're right. I think that like sort of presentation of language is loaded.
Yeah.
It takes with it more than just the meaning of the order of the words itself, but yeah, it's got all of these other sorts of histories of communication and
Right.
who is saying what to whom, and like
Yeah.
by the orator authority figure, or is this, you know, like is there an interplay, and yeah, I don't know.
So it's an interesting, it's still a question that I grapple with some. I did, Leah and I both performed some pieces by our mutual friend Todd Mullenberg, who has written some really fabulous pieces called The Speech Studies.
Yeah.
Which is this like amazing sort of computerized reading of like reworkings of common phrases like "it takes one to know one," or I don't know, or "shit or get off the pot," I think is one of them. And then you'll have a program, like a computer program, just like reorganize these words over and over and over again, and then have a computer read it out loud in this sort of like computer robot voice, and then transcribe the pitches of what that computer voice is, that the computer voice is making, and make that into a melody that you then play along with the instrument. So Leah and I did versions of these. I played it on horn, and she played viola.
How does it work on horn? I bet it sounds
it's
great.
So good. It's really incredible, because horn has already this sort of like Charlie Brown teacher quality.
Yeah, totally. And then it's within like the human voice speech range anyway, and like the bot that he uses is a very sexy, deep voiced Siri.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
she's down in that range, which I love.
It's Siri. He has a couple of male voices that he uses as well for. He has one for "God bless us, everyone." Well, bless us, everyone. One, bless us, one. And so you're playing, you know, this sort of like much deeper voice as well that works really well on horn. So that was enjoyable, and I would say, you know, that's the closest marriage I would say with like text and horn that I have done and feel really good about. But yeah, it's an ongoing question. So I don't know. Check back in 2 years.
Okay. Sure.
See if anything new has happened on that front.
I want to ask you about one more thing, and it's the Communist Manifesto that, which I don't know. This is one of my most favorite things that I've ever seen you do among all the greatest hits of Nicolee's career. That you read the Communist Manifesto in Manchester. Like
Yorkshire.
It's Yorkshire accent.
The Yorkshire dialect.
Oh, yes.
So this is not my piece. This was a performance. This is my performance of.
It well have been yours, you know.
Oh, I'm so glad you remembered that. So this fabulous poet, Steve I'm gonna get his name wrong. I want to find what his name, but his not. So this guy, Steve. Pretty sure his first name is Steve. I want to say it's like McCurry or McCullen. We're gonna find out, and I don't know.
We'll find out.
He transcribed in the 70s. He was thinking about Marxism, And the original Communist Manifesto had been translated into a variety of languages and distributed to workers because they were the people to whom this document was addressed. And so Steve had the idea that he should transcribe it to the dialect, to the Yorkshire dialect. And at the time in the 70s, York was a center of lots of mining and industry in the UK. And so he's taken the Communist Manifesto and transliterated it. So he's not only, he's translated it into like the slang of 1970s, like the 1970s Yorkshire dialect, but also transliterated it so that if you read it out loud, it reasonably resembles the Yorkshire dialect at the
it's
time.
It's like reading James Joyce, right? You just sort of like have to read it with an Irish accent sort of going on. You have to.
Right. And so I was like, this, I really want to do this. I want to, and there was a recording of him reading it that I listened to, and about 50% of it was intelligible to me. And I was so fascinated by that, but ostensibly this was in English.
Yeah.
And I really want to learn this because the text like wants you to read it out loud. And so I roped you into sort of being part of this sort of absurdist assembly line.
Yeah, assembly line is like the Ford factory.
As I read, maybe 20 minutes of this manifesto in a Yorkshire dialect that I tried really hard. I studied. Attempted. So yes, that was certainly a thing I did, and I'm so glad that you remembered that and liked that, because that's I encounter that. I have the paper in my files, and I encounter it from time to time and think, wow, that was a thing that I decided to do.
You decided that, and you did it. But it's so brilliant, right? Because of course, like you mentioned, that sort of York is working class. So we think of the equivalent, the corollary in the U.S. is like the Rust Belt, and it is associated with lower class of people, and so it's like the working man's poor man's accent or dialect, and so it's just there's so much about it that is so right. Good. I love it. Everybody, go find the Communist Manifesto in Yorkshire.
Communist Manifesto.
So that is among my favorite fondest performances of yours.
Amazing.
There are many, but that one I will never forget.
Maybe it's time to remount that.
Let's do it. Let's do a chorus of Yorkshire Communist Manifestos. A virtual choir.
Now, City, there's a right continent border about that this product of communism.
Communism, I love that. Communism. Oh, it's just so good. That's so good. Well, anyway, thanks so much for taking this time out of your beautiful, bright and sunny day in Colorado. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you taking the time to put together the beautiful video of your poetry and of your space and in this time and this setting, and it's really effective.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome and wonderful, and
well, thank you for all your work making this platform for us. I have to say, it's so wonderful seeing. So we both know many of these people who are featured among the experimentalists, and I haven't seen some of them in quite a long time, and it's so wonderful to see what people are up to, and so heartening. It's so nice to have a space to make things for that. I know it's I treasure the people who are there, and I treasure the work, and it means something. It's not just it's not just someone throwing something onto the internet. It feels deliberate and loved, and that is it's such a treat right now, that's saying a lot. Especially, so thank you. Yeah. Love it. I love it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And tune in again, friends. Bye. Put on more hats.